And of Asher he said, Let Asher be blessed with children. Let him be acceptable to his brethren, and let him dip his foot in oil. Thy shoes shall be iron and brass, and as thy days, so shall thy strength be. There is none like unto the God of Jeshurun, who rideth upon the heaven in thy help, and in his excellency on the sky. Eternal God is thy refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. And he shall thrust out the enemy from before thee, and shall say, Destroy them.
Asher is the 10th son of Jacob from Zilpah. Zilpah is Leah's handmaid and the daughter of Raphias, a relative of Abraham. Zilpah was named after the city her father Raphias was captive in. Zilpah's sister is Bilhah. Both Zilpah and Bilhah are married to Jacob, the progenitor of the Israelite bloodline. Jacob established his bloodline with 4 women. All 4 women are Hebrews. When Asher was born, Leah said she was happy. Leah went on to say, The daughters will call me blessed, and she called Zilpah's second son Asher.
And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bare Jacob a second son. And Leah said, Happy am I, for the daughters will call me blessed. And she called his name Asher.
Asher became the progenitor of the tribe of Asher in the Israelite nation. The scriptures is silent about Asher and his tribe. The tribe of Asher is not one of the tribes the Most High used significantly. Therefore, not much is said about Asher and his tribe. Asher and his children join a list of Israelite tribes that are overshadowed in the scriptures. Despite the role of the tribe of Asher, the Most High used every tribe, and every tribe have a purpose in our nation. The purpose of the 12 tribe series is to help Israelites all over the world identify the tribe they are from. There are many Israelites in the awakening that inquire about their tribe. Israelites, if you desire to know your tribe, you have to go to the Most High and ask him to reveal your tribe. Once you ask the Most High, you must wait for the answer. While you wait, continue to serve the Most High in the spirit and in truth. The scripture says some have not because they ask not.
Ye lust and have not, ye kill, and desire to have, and cannot obtain. Ye fight and war, yet ye have not, because ye ask not.
Too many Israelites are asking the Most High questions and refusing to wait for the answer. The Most High work on his time, not yours. When the time comes for you to know the answer, the Most High will reveal it to you. A lot of Israelites must be patient with the Most High. I know we are living in the information age, and the workers of iniquity made everything available at a click of a button. When it comes to the truth, the Spirit of truth is sent by the Most High to reveal truth and to prophesy about the things to come. If the Spirit of truth is taking time to answer your prayers or to reveal truth to you, you need to examine yourself to see if there's any sin found in you. Some of you are grieving the Holy Spirit, making it difficult for the Spirit of the Most High to communicate with you.
And grieve not the Holy Spirit of God, whereby ye are sealed unto the day of redemption.
Unbelief stands in the way of many Israelites. Majority of the time, the Most High answer your questions. However, most Israelites can't comprehend, or they were not satisfied with the answer, therefore they dismiss the answer. Israelites, that is why you must examine yourself to see if iniquity is found in you. Sin separates you from the Most High.
But your iniquities have separated between you and your God, and your sins have hid his face from you, that he will not hear.
If iniquity is found in you, the Most High is not going to communicate with you until you repent. A lot of your actions hinder your prayers, causing the Most High to not hear your prayers. Israelites, everything always leads back to repentance. That is why I encourage all who come to this channel to make repentance a daily routine. If the spirit of hate, jealousy, envy, division, and many other unclean spirits have a stronghold on your life, these devils will hinder your prayers. The scriptures in the Bible said to the husbands, dwell with their wife according to knowledge, and give honor to your wife, so that their prayers may not be hindered.
Likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife, as unto the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered.
In this generation, the prayers of many indigenous Black people are being hindered because the spirit of division is running rampant in the Black community. A lot of indigenous Black people allow the spirit of division to hinder their prayers. You can't hate yourself and your people and expect your prayers to be heard by the Most High. Many of you have offended the Most High with your self-hatred and the hatred of your people. You are the image of the living Creator. The Satans managed to get you to despise the image of the Most High.
So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them.
In an undisclosed book I've read, this book revealed that when Adam was created, the 4 holy angels that are in the presence of the Most High named Adam. The book of Enoch revealed the 4 holy angels that sits in the presence of the Most High. The first, your prince, the holy angel Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Phanuel. And on the 4 sides of the Lord of Spirits, I saw 4 presents, different from those that sleep not, and I learnt their names. But the angel that went with me made known to me their names, and showed me all the hidden things. The holy angel Michael found the first letter to the name of the first man created when he went to the east and found a star and took the first letter of the name of the star. Gabriel went to the south of the earth and found the star and took the first letter of its name. Raphael went to the north and saw a western star and took the first letter of that star's name. Finally, Uriel went to the west and found a star and took the first letter of that star name. When you combine the 4 letters together, it formed Adam. When Adam was made, and there was no name assigned to him yet, the Lord told the 4 angels to seek a name for him. Michael went out to the east and saw the eastern star, named Encolin, and took its first letter from it. Gabriel went out to the south and saw the southern star, named Dices, and took its first letter from it. Raphael went out to the north and saw the northern star, named Arthos, and took its first letter from it. Uriel went out to the west and saw the western star, and named Mensabrium, and took its first letter from it. When the letters were brought together, the Lord said to Uriel, "Read these letters." He read them and said, Adam. Once Adam was created, your prince, the holy angel Michael, commanded the angels to worship the image of the Most High. The Most High commanded that the angels do so. Your adversary Satanel, in some scriptures is called Lucifer or Satan, refused to worship the image of the Most High, that is Adam. The angels that was beneath him refused to worship as well. The infamous scripture in the Bible that said, "I will place my throne above the stars of God and be like the Most High." Satanel said this to Michael if the Most High becomes angry with him for not worshiping Adam. He would place his throne above the stars. Satanel's failure to worship the image of the Most High is one of the reasons Satanel and his angels were kicked out of the heavens. Michael went out and called all the angels, saying, "Worship the image of God as the Lord God has commanded."
we don't read the Bible and tend to think technology, but I want you to think these people who were not, for example, boat makers, managed to build seafaring vessels that could withstand really bad storms. And you think they did it by trial and error? Like, oh, let's build a raft. Oh, that didn't work. 50 people drowned. I don't think they did it like that. I think they observed their neighbors with all of their skill and all of their technology and whatever they knew to do and replicated or even asked for their help. It's completely plausible. So this is why the location of Asher's territory is very important. Today we're going to be looking at the tribe of Asher. So, Asher would be Leah's son. If you remember, Rachel and Leah are the sisters, and then there were also children by the handmaids of each sister, Zilpah and Bilhah. And so, Asher is born to Leah. Asher's name means happy. And to get a good grasp of Asher's family record, you can turn there if you like with me to 1 Chronicles 7 and verse 30. And we will probably come back to this repeatedly because there are some things in here that bring great clarity to this tribe. So 1 Chronicles 7 and verse 30. And while you're turning there, let me just say there are a lot of folks still scratching their head trying to figure out how is it possible to trace these biblical people. And I've said to you before, very easily. Many of these people, generations down the road, will tell stories that are very reminiscent of the Bible. They're perverted because it's like broken telephone through time. But they will either tell stories that greatly resemble the Bible, or they will have trace relatives that they say, I am descendant of so-and-so, which we trace back to some of these clans and tribes. So right where the Bible, basically, where these people are dumped into buffer zones, we have new people in a very short period of time reemerge under different names. And some of those names were given by the Assyrians. Some of those names were given by, depending on where these people were deposited and what areas they were deposited in, they would have been called something by somebody else, and that name would eventually become kind of like, it would stick to them, and they'd be known by this name, no longer the tribe of thus and so. So, 1 Chronicles 7 and verse 30, the sons of Asher, Imnah and Isua and Ishui, and Beriah, and this is an oddity, and Sarah, their sister. And that is an oddity. We seldom read of a female in the genealogies. I can't tell you that there's a specific reason why she's named here. It's just an oddity because for the most part we're looking at male descendants alone, all right? And the sons of Beriah, this is very important. I want you to pay attention to this. The sons of Beriah, Heber and Malchiel, who is the father of Birzvith, and Heber begat Japhlet and Shomer and Hathan and Shua and their sister, again another mention, very interesting, the sons of Japhlet. And if you just keep reading, you've got really a very good sense. When you've got all of these descendants like this, we're now kind of getting into the understanding of the tribe of Asher, and many of these descendants will become tribal, and their names will morph a little bit, but they will be a tribe of the tribe of Asher, but clan, and their clan name may actually overtake their tribal name eventually. So just as a sidebar. So if you read through all that, and then verse 40 says, and all these were the children of Asher, heads of their father's house, choice and mighty men of valor, chief of the princes, and the number throughout the genealogy of them that were apt to the war and to battle was 26,000 men. Now that's the record here. If you go to the record in Numbers 1, which is the first census, don't turn there, but it's the first census taken after they come out of Egypt, you find the number of the total fighting individuals of the tribe of Asher is 41,500. And there's a little sidebar to this, because if you know how they're basically around the tabernacle. Think of it as a cross or a plus sign, and that's how they were encamped. And so, kind of interesting that Asher would make up a component of what I would call the rear guard. So if you look at the way they were set up, you might say, well, whoever they were camping with or close to, they might have also been influenced by. And I'll explain what I mean by that, because Asher had a close proximity to Dan in terms of the encampment, in their placement. So is it possible that, for example, I've said to you, Dan, we know there was an exodus of Dan before they went into bondage. Is it possible that Asher had a similar situation or circumstance? We're going to ask or probe that question in a minute. If you comb the record, you have a second census that's taken. So the first one out of Egypt is 41,500. The second one is 53,400. So that tells you they were doing their yab, they were multiplying, all right? Keeping busy while they weren't sacrificing animals and killing giants, right? All right, never mind. But what's interesting is by the time you get to First Chronicles, the number of fighting men has dropped dramatically, 26,000 fighting men in First Chronicles. So that's kind of a note of interest. It tells you that in your own time, I don't have the time, you may want to read if something happened to the tribe of Asher, and you have to comb the record and do a little bit of homework. I'm not going to do it for you. But some of you may be familiar, if you studied Hebrew with me or if you watched me do any type of Hebrew translation, you may have heard me mention the name Marcus Jastrow. And Marcus Jastrow wrote that it's really probably the most exhaustive Hebrew, Aramaic. It's a form of a dictionary, I guess. It's just intense, all right? But he is perhaps one of the most prolific Talmudic scholars, and he made the connection that Asher's family, he proposed this, and I actually am in agreement with him on this, that in the ancient Egyptian inscriptions known as the Amarna tablets, there is a person named Heber. We just read that name, Heber. That was in verse 31, 1 Chronicles 7 and 31, Heber. He's saying that that clan is the same as the Chaberi clan found in the Amarna letters. Also linking these to another people side by side called the Milkili people. So he makes the connection, and I actually agree with him. So this may have root in something else, because the Chaberi were also synonymous with the Habiru, the Hebrews. And we've got this name Hebrew right there. Now, I want you to think about this, because we're going to encounter this, so I might as well just say it now. Heber here is the same as Eber in Genesis that we looked at earlier when we talk about people who say, for example, those people before Egypt's bondage, for example, were they Hebrews? Yes. But they were not Jews. And you can't even say that they were Israelites, because that didn't exist yet. So these are important things. A lot of people miss this and they just gloss right over it. So why is this important? Because we're going to encounter some places that these people travel to where you've got the Hebrew name included in a name. And it's hard to, at this point, it's hard to tell, was that given from the Genesis record, or is this named after a descendant out of this family? So we'll try and figure that out. I don't know if we'll be able to. For this congregation, if you've been around any amount of time and listened to the teaching here, you are no stranger to the Song of Asher in Deuteronomy 33. Now, most of you who will be familiar with this, you probably are familiar with what we call the nitropil aspect of Deuteronomy 33, which is what? As thy days, so shall thy strength be. Ooh, we even had repetition there. Yay. Okay. But pay close attention, because this is Moses basically doing kind of a little bit of what Jacob did. But if you read carefully, starting at verse 24, end of Asher, he said, "Let Asher be blessed with children. Let him be acceptable to his brethren. And let him dip his foot in oil." And then, of course, that very strange and often misconstrued, "Thy shoes shall be iron and brass, as thy days, so shall thy strength be. There is none like unto the God of Jeshurun, who rideth upon the heaven in thy help and excellency in the sky. The eternal God is thy refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. And he shall thrust out the enemy from before thee, and shall say, Destroy them." That is all part of the Song of Asher. Now, we've seen that as a nitro pill, but I'm asking you to consider something very interesting that I will, once I've laid the foundation, I'll ask you if you can make even a small connection to this, because we've often said shoes of iron and brass. You know, you can take that as how it's been taught here, tough shoes for a tough trip, and that's a wonderful faith message. But maybe there may be some other message in there too that may have a double meaning, and we'll see if we can pull that out of here. So, what do we know about this tribe? Well, if you start looking at the land allotment, this is all background, so you got to lay the foundation so that we're able to see what happened here. So, starting in Joshua 19, we have the land allotment, and I ask you to pay it. You know, sometimes reading these things is kind of tedious, but there's some hard points in here I ask you to consider and take note of. So Asher's portion, which is Joshua 19, beginning at verse 24, and the fifth lot came out of the tribe of the children of Asher according to their families, and their border was Helkah and Hali, Betin, and Asheph, and Alamelech, Amad, Mishel, and reacheth to Carmel westward, and to Shehor Libnath, and turneth towards the sun rising, to Beth Dagon, and reacheth to Zebulun, and to the valley of Jipthael, toward the north side of Beth Emek, and Neel, that goeth out to Kabul on the left hand, Hebron, Rehob, Hamon, Cana, and even unto great Zidon. That is Sidon. Very important. And why do I say that? Because read, then the coast turneth to Ramoth and the strong city of Tyre. Now, what's very bizarre is your margin will read Sur, if you have a Bible like mine, but it should be Sidon and Tyre. And I'm pointing this out for a reason. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Asher according to their families, these cities with their villages. So I want you to put in perspective that their land assignment would touch the very edge of Sidon and would touch the very edge of Tyre. And that is very insightful. Why? Because we know that that area was controlled either completely by Canaanite or by Phoenician. And so what makes that important? Remember, I told you, anytime you have a border with people who weren't part of this group, you would most likely have an exchange of ideas. You may even have an exchange of potential mates. That means foreign marriages, trade, all kinds of things that we don't tend to think of. We think, oh, they got a land allotment, and they must have put a fence there and built a wall and protected themselves. No, it didn't work like that. So I want you to imagine that where they are buttressed up against is right up against Phoenician and Canaanite territory, which tells me that they would have had exposure to these people, to these other people. And if you remember, I addressed this when I talked about Dan, because there's no doubt in my mind that there was exchange of information, of technology. We don't read the Bible and tend to think technology, but I want you to think these people who were not, for example, boat makers, managed to build seafaring vessels that could withstand really bad storms. And do you think they did it by trial and error? Like, oh, let's build a raft. Oh, that didn't work. 50 people drowned. I don't think they did it like that. I think they observed their neighbors with all of their skill and all of their technology and whatever they knew to do and replicated or even asked for their help. It's completely plausible. So this is why the location of Asher's territory is very important. Then you read just a couple of pages later, you'll read in chapter 21 and verse 6. This is kind of interesting. It mentions the sons of Gershon that received 13 cities from the tribe of Asher, as well as Issachar, Naphtali, and the half-tribe of Manasseh east of the Jordan. Verse 6, the children of Gershon had by lot, out of the families of the tribe of Issachar, and out of the tribe of Asher, and out of the tribe of Naphtali, and out of the half-tribe of Manasseh and Bashan, 13 cities. So what we know, and this is what's interesting, just turn a couple of pages to the first chapter of Judges. We've been here before, so forgive the repetition. But in Judges chapter 1 and verse 31 and 32, remember God said, drive the people who are inhabiting the land, drive them out, get rid of them. Well, verse 31, Judges 1, verse 31, neither did Asher drive out the inhabitants of Acco, nor the inhabitants of Zidon, nor of Ehlab, or of Achzib, or of Hebla, or Helba, nor of Aphik, nor of Rehob. But the Asherites dwelt among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land, for they did not drive them out. So, I've already addressed this before, but it's noteworthy to say, God said, the land will be yours if you do thus and so. And I don't think anybody really successfully did what they were supposed to do here, so let's not just isolate one tribe. But the important thing that I'm pointing out is don't be surprised after all this time. Remember, put this in perspective. They have already, all of the children of Israel collectively, have already grumbled and complained, which caused them to wander in the desert for 40 years. Do you really think it would take 40 years to get to the promised land? So that's God's way of saying that's your reward for being such stiff-necked, complaining, obtuse people. Okay? That was their punishment. 40 years wandering in the desert. And then we have, when they finally at least get to where they're supposed to be, then they build the golden calf. They're all responsible. It wasn't just one tribe, one person. They all participated. So when you get to this place where God says, drive out your enemies, you'd think they'd say, yes, sir, right? Because at least check one box. Do one thing that God said. No. And the consequences, I've read them already to you. You can go back and read in Deuteronomy, the blessings and curses that Moses gave. And basically the whole Bible speaks of the same thing. Failure to do what God basically told them, instructed them to do, produced some very dire consequences. The reason why God said, I want you to drive out the enemies and the people, the foreigners in the land, there was one primary goal. God knew if they eradicated and got rid of those people, they would not be influenced by pagan religion, by pagan practices. They would not have interest to intermarry with other people outside of their tribe or outside of their realm. But that's exactly what happened. So it's kind of a no-brainer when you start to look at how everything just goes downhill, and suddenly most of these people are steeped in idolatry, pagan worship, and they're intermarrying, just exactly what God said to not do. So kind of an interesting thing. Then if you turn just a few pages more to Judges 5, and we've already looked at this passage. Here we have the call of Deborah, who is basically the judge at this time, and it's a call for all of the tribes to basically help fight off in a situation, we'll call it, that needed every able body. And if you remember, down there we're looking at verse 17. Gilead abode in Jordan. Why did Dan remain in ships? Asher continued on the seashore. and abode in his breaches. Now, in a previous message, I pointed this out. Why did Dan remain in his ships? I think Dan was saying, we out of here, okay? That's what I think they were saying. No, we're not helping. We're done. We're out of here. But Asher, very interesting. The Swedish Bible, I wish I had brought it with me. The Swedish Bible, the word for breach is right there. In the Swedish version of this passage is vik, V-I-K, sometimes V-I-G, but V-I-K, which is where most scholars, including myself, believe that the word Viking comes from, this particular passage in the Swedish Bible. That being said, it's very interesting. Remember I said to you that these people would be heavily influenced in the territory where they live if they have influences from Canaanite and from Phoenician counterparts, if you will. There's no doubt in my mind that both Dan and Asher, and possibly some others, but certainly these that were living close to these coastal cities, would have been influenced by these seafaring people who were experts. They basically perfected the art of seafaring and sea commerce, and if you really want to go the whole 9 yards, it's the Phoenicians that basically paved the way, opening up that whole area from the coastal line, we'll call it of the Levant or the Holy Land. If you're going outward, Turkey, Greece, basically there were places along the way of commerce and trade that they established that then become kind of like a known freeway, except it's on water. They established a lot of this, which paves the way for these tribes, those that will be traveling after Egypt's bondage, paves the way for them basically to migrate by sea very easily, because now it's well established. They're not entering into lands or sea that have not been traversed before. So this is an important sidebar. Now, sorry to make you turn back and forth here, but if you go back to First Chronicles, and I want you to look at something there that I think is rather interesting in the 12th chapter, because this is all kind of foundation and background for what we'll be looking at. So, in the 12th chapter, 1 Chronicles, verse 36, we have here, basically David is calling men to war. He's calling them into his army. And most of the tribes are present here. Verse 36 says, "And of Asher such as went forth to battle, expert in war, 40,000. And that's kind of an important piece of information, because this is the largest amount of fighting men, only second to the tribe of Zebulun when it comes to David's personal army. Equally, and I won't make you turn there, but in 1 Kings 4 it shows an official from the tribe of Asher, the son of Hushai. So if you know the story, Hushai basically agrees to go over and pretend to serve Absalom. This is why Hushai is called David's friend, because we know what Absalom was. What's sad is later in the later history, we read of Solomon giving away 20 cities of Asher to the king of Hiram, basically as a trade and reward for his help and participation. And King Hiram did not respect the land that was given. He thought it was not of any value. So can you imagine that, having your land taken away and given to someone who doesn't even respect it, saying, oh, that's trash, that's garbage. That probably must have been a real dig to this tribe of Asher, even maybe bringing on some anger. Why did this happen? But we know something interesting. When the kingdom split, we have Asher basically staying to the north. That was their assigned territory, but I want to make a point about this. Even though that was their land allotment to the north, because of their allegiance to David, it would have been very easy for them to have stayed in the south, outside of their land. Remember, they're serving David. they would then eventually possibly go on to serve Solomon in the same capacity. So you could make a case and say, when the kingdom split, they could have verily said, no, we will stay on the side of the southern border because that is essentially the epicenter where all things that were relevant both to David and Solomon were. But they chose to go and stay in their own territory. And I think the amazing thing about that is that God knew this was his plan. I mean, God has used many people to accomplish his bidding. You know, we've seen the Chaldeans, the Assyrians, the Babylonians. So it's all part of the plan for them to basically stay in their territory. Now, here's what I was trying to point out. You remember we looked at in 1 Chronicles 7, one of the descendants' name is Heber, right? You remember that? We just looked at it. So here's what's bizarre. One part of a Phoenician colony was called the Hebrides, or the Hyborides. I'm not sure how you want to pronounce that, but right there is Heber right there. The question is, was this named after Heber of Genesis, or is this named after a descendant of the tribe of Asher? Now, I'd lean heavily towards the Heber of Genesis, making it an earlier time, but we can't know that. There's no way to know. What we do know is it's named after one of these two, so it's good enough for me to kind of see there's a connection there. And of course, there is a connection when we talk about nomenclature. Why? Because we've got these areas, Heber, Iberia, Hebrides. So, William Camden, the British historian and chronicler, wrote in his work entitled Britannia, "The merchants of Asher worked the mines at Cornwall, not as slaves, but as masters and exporters." This really got my attention. And remember, I said this to you before, we tend to think of the tribes as kind of these lesser educated people, not advanced in understanding or technology. It's not so. That is a complete error. What is important is the fact that this William Camden chronicles this, that they worked in the mines not as slaves but basically as masters and owners, tells you they had to have had a connection undisputedly to the Phoenicians, because this mining at Cornwall, we know really the inception of it began with the Phoenicians. That's why I said to you, pay close attention to where their land bordered on. They had to have heavy influences from these people. But that begs another question. If they were merchants in the mines, tin, metal, it begs me to ask, when Moses said, shoes of iron and brass, is there a double meaning there? And I'm not saying there is. I'm just saying it's something to kind of noodle in your mind, because, you know, Moses could have said, you're just going to have a tough trip. The colloquial version. It's going to be tough. Your life's going to be difficult. But iron and brass, and then there's the other difficult thing for me to wrap my mind around, which is brass. And I'm not really quite sure what age that fits into. But iron, we know what period that fits into. So then there's another question you have to ask yourself, which we can entertain at another time. Was that a prophetic foretelling? I don't know. But we do know by the time of the Assyrian deportation that some of the tribe of Asher was known by the Assyrians, referred to as Issedones, Issedones, also sometimes referred to as, and also as Assi, Asii. We get those names from some of the scant writing available to us in the secular realm in antiquity, not modern scholarship, okay? Most assuredly, we also have people coming out of this tribe that will be known as the Aorsi, the Asir, and the Asurs. Good enough breadcrumbs right now with all of these names that if you kind of do a little bit of investigating and if you were kind of probing, you would see these people went in many different directions. So we have some of them living around the east of the Black Sea. And it's recorded by several writers of antiquity that the chief ruler bearing the name from this clan, Odin, which we'll have to come back to, as there's not enough room to talk about this here, but Odin moved his people into the northern part of Europe so as to not have to deal with the heavy hand of the Roman Empire. That's, of course, at a later time, but you get the idea. Once you start seeing east of the Black Sea, you'd say, well, were they clustered with the Scythians? Well, that brings up an interesting question, because we have a swath of those people known as Scythian that will end up basically Norway, Normandy, and eventually in Iceland, hailing from the tribe of Asher, but clumped into the Scythian category. So something really that I don't know how we'll pick this apart. We may just have to do a whole focus on how the Scythians in their subgroups migrated, and that might give us better insight. But if you have been around this ministry, say 20, 30 years, if I say the word Latin or Hallstatt, you know what it is. For people that don't, please go and look that up. It's very important. Latin, 2 words, L-A, and then ten, T-E-N-E, and Hallstatt. These are 2 areas where we have a tremendous amount of remains, and now DNA has super helped us understand who these remains belong to, but a whole culture that flourished. And we attach these people basically to a lot of the migratory patterns coming out of the area we're discussing. So kind of an important thing, but if you're not sure, please look it up. It's kind of very fascinating. There's lots of information online. But these people of the tribe of Asher will be known by another name, which you may have heard of, called the Vandals. Veneti, who were in Gaul, who were also called Pictones or Picts. And we can trace these people basically all the way into Northern Ireland, onto Wales. So now you're getting an idea. We have them east of the Black Sea. We have them basically migrating the same pattern as most of the other tribes that left by water. But what's interesting is how they actually will start fanning out and end up in other places that you'd say, how can that be? So hold on, because this might take a little weird turn for a minute. Now, you remember we were looking at Judges 5, and I pointed out to you that term breaches for Asher, belonging to and connecting to the term Viking. We can also know that the son of Asher, Beriah, remember Hebrew, Bet or Vet. If you're looking at the Hebrew language, sometimes we cannot know if there are no diacritical marks. We can't know if it's a B or a V. So I want you to think that Beriah could have been Variah. And why that's important, because we also are going to know these people who are descendants of Beriah, biblical Beriah, as Variah or Varagu. They are his descendants. We can trace them definitively. That's
In this video, I want to focus on what happened to the northern tribes between 722 BC when they were relocated and 612 BC, which is when I believe they departed for Asherith, which we know as the Americas. To do this, we'll go back to around 800 BC, when God first prophesied on the fall of the Assyrians that would take place in 612 BC through the prophet Jonah. We all know Jonah because of the story of him being in the belly of the fish for 3 days, but we don't often hear that the reason God did this to him was because of a commandment that he disobeyed. I'll read the book of Jonah from chapter 1, verses 1 to 3. Now the word of the Lord came unto Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness is come up before me. But Jonah rose up to flee unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord, and went down to Joppa. And he found a ship going to Tarshish, so he paid the fare thereof, and went down into it, to go with them unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. So instead of going to Nineveh, which would end up the final capital city of the Assyrian Empire, he tried to escape to Tarshish. We know he received this prophecy around 800 BC through reading the book of 2 Kings chapter 14, and I'll read from verses 23 to 25. In the 15th year of Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, began to reign in Samaria, and reigned 41 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. He departed not from all the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. He restored the coast of Israel, from the entering of Hamath unto the sea of the plain, according to the word of the Lord God of Israel, which he spake by the hand of his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet, which was of Gath-hepher. Jeroboam II began to reign in 826 BC, although Assyrian records place his reign from 790 BC, which is why I give an estimate of 800 BC for Jonah's prophecy. So knowing this, we can look at what happened with Jonah in chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. And the word of the Lord came unto Jonah the second time, saying, Arise, go unto Nineveh, that great city, and preach unto it the preaching that I bid thee. We know what was bid Jonah from chapter 1, verse 2. Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness is come up before me. So their sins now need to be paid for. So Jonah preaches of the city's destruction, and I'll pick up in verse 5 in chapter 3. So the people of Nineveh believed God, and proclaimed a fast, and put on sackcloth, from the greatest of them even to the least of them. So because they did this, God did not punish them at that time. I'll read verse 10. And God saw their works, that they turned from their evil way, and God repented of the evil that he had said that he would do unto them, and he did it not. So this is what some people misunderstand about God's prophecies. Nineveh's sin still must be paid for, and what God says will always come true. I'll read Malachi chapter 3 and verse 6. For I am the Lord, I change not, therefore ye sons of Jacob are not consumed. So Jonah's prophecy of the destruction for Nineveh would be for a latter time, or 612 BC to be exact, which would allow for the tribes of the northern kingdom to make their way to the Americas. This prophecy would have come just around the same time of the prophecies of Hosea, where we knew the northern kingdom would be taken into slavery by the Assyrians. I'll read Hosea chapter 9 and verse 3. They shall not dwell in the Lord's land, but Ephraim, and this is referring to the northern kingdom, shall return to Egypt, and they shall eat unclean things in Assyria. Now we know the northern kingdom did not return to literal Egypt, as Egypt is a synonym for slavery in the Bible. I'll read Exodus chapter 20 and verse 2. I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. I'll also get the book of Micah chapter 6 and verse 4. For I brought thee up out of the land of Egypt, and redeemed thee out of the house of servants, and I sent before thee Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. Plus we also know from Deuteronomy chapter 17 verse 16 that we would not go back into slavery into Egypt again. But he shall not multiply horses to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt, to the end that he should multiply horses. For as much as the Lord hath said unto you, ye shall henceforth return no more that way. And we can also confirm this back in the book of Hosea in chapter 11, and we're going to read verses 3 to 5. I told Ephraim also to go, taking them by their arms, but they knew not that I healed them. I drew them with cords of a man, and with bands of love. And I was to them as they that take off the yoke of their jaws, and I laid meat unto them. He shall not return into the land of Egypt, but the Assyrian shall be his king, because they refused to return. In 722 BC, the capital of the Assyrian Empire was Nimrud, but by the end of the Northern Kingdom's captivity, it would be Nineveh. So now we can look at other prophecies to show what would happen to Nineveh during this time. Nahum prophesied at the time when Nineveh was the capital. I'll read the book of Nahum, chapter 1. I'm going to read verses 1 to 3. The burden of Nineveh. Burden is just destruction. The book of the vision of Nahum the Elkoshite. God is jealous, and the Lord revengeth. The Lord revengeth and is furious. The Lord will take vengeance on his adversaries, and he reserveth wrath for his enemies. The Lord is slow to anger, and great in power, and will not at all acquit the wicked. The Lord have his way in the whirlwind and in the storm, and the clouds are the dust of his feet. So the Most High here lets us know that he is slow to anger, but will not acquit the wicked. This is the delayed judgment of Nineveh. I find it interesting what it reads in verse 8. But with an overrunning flood, he will make an utter end of the place thereof, and darkness shall pursue his enemies. I mentioned in previous videos of the reports from Diodorus that the Tigris River flooded Nineveh in 612 BC during the battle that helped the Babylonians and the Medes to defeat the Assyrians. Zephaniah prophesied about 10 years before the battle, and I'm going to read his book from chapter 2 and verse 13. And he will stretch out his hand against the north and destroy Assyria, and will make Nineveh a desolation, and dry like a wilderness. So the Most High was always going to do what he said in the book of Jonah. All sins must be paid for eventually. We are also fortunate enough to have the account of Tobit, who lived in Nineveh during the Assyrian captivity. I'll read Tobit chapter 1, I'm going to read verses 1 and 2. The book of the words of Tobit, son of Tobiel, the son of Ananiel, the son of Aduel, the son of Gabael, of the seed of Asael, of the tribe of Naphtali, who in the time of NINEVEH, king of the Assyrians, was led captive out of Thisbe, which is at the right hand of that city, which is called properly Naphtali, in Galilee above Asher. NINEVEH here is Sargon II. It was during his time that the northern kingdom was deported, though Salmanassar V took Samaria, and we could read that in 2nd Esdras chapter 13 and verse 40. Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king, whom Salmanassar, the king of Assyria, led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. Salmanassar died in the same year he defeated Israel and took Samaria, and it was Sargon II who was most likely responsible for completing the deportation of the northern tribes, and he also takes credit for capturing Samaria himself. But we know it was Salmanassar V that launched the campaign, as Babylonian texts also state that Salmanassar was the one to take Samaria. But we'll get back to Tobit, as he lets us know more about the fate of the northern tribes during the captivity. I'll read verses 3 to 6 back in chapter 1. I, Tobit, have walked all the days of my life in the ways of truth and justice, and I did many alms deeds to my brethren and my nation, whom came with me to Nineveh, into the land of the Assyrians. And when I was in mine own country, in the land of Israel, being but young, all the tribe of Naphtali, my father, fell from the house of Jerusalem, which was chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, that all the tribes should sacrifice there, where the temple of the habitation of the Most High was consecrated, and built for all ages. Now all the tribes together which revolted, and the house of my father Naphtali sacrificed unto the heifer Baal. But I alone went often to Jerusalem at the feast, as it was ordained unto all the people of Israel by an everlasting decree, having the first fruits and tenths of increase, with that which was first shorn, and them gave I at the altar to the priests, the children of Aaron. So he was a Naphthalite. The tribe of Naphtali would eventually end up sharing South America with the tribe of Asher. He was deported to Nineveh, but would still travel to Jerusalem for the feast days, and because of this, the Most High blessed him. I'll read verses 9 to 14. Furthermore, when I was come to the age of a man, I married Anna of mine own kindred, and of her I begat Tobias. And when we were carried away captives to Nineveh, all my brethren and those that were of my kindred did eat of the bread of the Gentiles, but I kept myself from eating, because I remembered God with all of my heart. And the Most High gave me grace and favor before NMSR, so that I was his purveyor. And I went into Media, and left in trust with Gabael, the brother of Gabrias, at Rages, a city of the Medes, 10 talents of silver. So we see here other Naphtalites living in other cities of Media, as we know from 2 Kings chapter 17 and verse 6. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria, and carried Israel away into Assyria, and placed them in Halah and in Habor by the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes. So we'll go back to Tobit chapter 1 and read verse 15. Now when NMSR was dead, Sennacherib his son reigned in his stead, whose estate was troubled that I could not go into Media. This is how we know NMSR is Sargon II. He was the father of Sennacherib. So Tobit would bury the dead Israelites that Sennacherib would slay and leave in the streets, but this soon got him in trouble. Verse 19, and I'll read to 22. And when one of the Ninevites went and complained of me to the king, that I buried them and hid myself, understanding that I was sought for to be put to death, I withdrew myself for fear. Then all my goods were forcibly taken away, neither was there anything left me beside my wife Anna and my son Tobias. And there passed not 55 days before 2 of his sons killed him, and they fled into the mountains of Ararat. And Sarchedonus his son reigned in his stead, who appointed over his father's accounts, and over all his affairs, Achiacharus, my brother, Anael's son. And Achiacharus, entreating for me, I returned to Nineveh. Now Achiacharus was cupbearer, and keeper of the signet, and steward, and overseer of the accounts, and Sarchedonus appointed him next unto him, and he was my brother's son. Sennacherib was killed by his sons in 681 BC. And the reason this is important is because we have a time frame for when this all takes place. After this happened, Tobit commanded his son to relocate to Ecbatana, another city in Media, where he met his wife. He said this in Tobit chapter 14 and verse 4. Go into Media, my son, for I surely believe those things which Jonah the prophet spake of Nineveh, that it shall be overthrown, and that for a time peace shall rather be in Media, and that our brethren shall lie scattered in the earth from that good land, and Jerusalem shall be desolate, and the house of God in it shall be burned, and shall be desolate for a time. So he is predicting that Jonah's prophecy will come true about Nineveh, and that the city of the Medes would be the starting point from where the northern kingdom would spread across the world. We also see that he prophesies that the temple at Jerusalem would be burnt at least 50 years before it actually happened. I'll just finish in verses 12 to 15. This is referring now to Tobias his son. And when Anna his mother was dead, he buried her with his father. But Tobias departed with his wife and his children to Ecbatana, to Raguel his father-in-law, where he became old with honor. And he buried his father and mother-in-law honorably, and he inherited their substance and his father Tobit's. And he died at Ecbatana in Media, being 127 years old. But before he died, he heard of the destruction of Nineveh, which was taken by Nebuchadnezzar and Ahasuerus. And before his death he rejoiced over Nineveh. So he lived in the cities of the Medes, right around the Caspian Sea, where we know the northern kingdom were placed before making their way to the Americas. I'll read 2nd Esdras 13 again, verses 40 and 41. Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoner out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king, whom Salmanassar the king of Assyria led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so they came into another land. But they took counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen, that's the city of the Medes, and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt. And I'll just jump down to verse 44. For the Most High then showed signs for them, and held still the flood, till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of 1.5 years, and the same region is called Ashereth. We already went through the possible flooding in the region in 612 BC, but the greater significance of this journey is that this is the location where haplogroup Q originates, who were the first people to inhabit the Americas. Now, scientific consensus claims haplogroup Q originated 29,000 years ago and is descended from haplogroup P. Let me first dispel the age. All dating for haplogroups are theoretical. First assuming evolution happened in the way that we have been told, then applying statistical models to the theories based on an assumption of the rate of mutation, thus giving exaggerated timescales. They admit as much in the literature, although of course they would not agree that the assumptions imposed by the proposed models overinflates the timescales. I'll give an example of how I believe they have done this. My haplogroup is haplogroup E, and estimated to be about 70,000 years old, originating in Eurasia. This would trace the migration of my population group back through the West Indies, then to West Africa, and then through Israel, having happened over about 60,000 years, approximately. A far greater timescale than it took for us to become a nation about 3,500 years ago. However, we know through the work of Priya Morjani from the Department of Genetics, a Harvard student, that when she looked at similarities between the 8 Jewish sects or ethnogroups, for example, the Ashkenazi, the Mizrahi, the Sephardic, etc., the only thing that linked all 8 groups together would be that they all mixed with a certain African population group approximately 72 generations ago, which would suggest that Iron Age Israel would have been inhabited with this group. Or to put it another way, before the Babylonian captivity, people who we identify today as Africans were living in Israel and would have been known as Israelites. So this is a way, without using molecular clocks and mutation rates, to verify the time it took for my haplogroup to migrate through Africa from Israel. We didn't migrate into Africa from the Middle East 60,000 years ago, only to repeat the same migration pattern again 2,000 years ago. Likewise, haplogroup Q did not migrate from the region around the Caspian Sea 29,000 years ago, only to repeat that exact journey in 612 BC. That would be a massive coincidence. I'll now address homology and its use within phylogeny. This is a model that works on the assumption that we come from a common ancestor without taking into consideration that a common designer could be the reason for homology as well. And when we use molecular evidence to try to support homology, we still have no evidence that we come from a common ancestor. Despite all of this, we create a phylogenetic tree of haplogroups that show extended timelines and the parent-child relationships between haplogroups. But we have to remember, haplogroups represent population genetics. It's the study of a movement of a population group. It doesn't represent an homogeneous population. While we can make assumptions about the degree to which a haplogroup can represent a single ethnic group, we cannot be sure. But even if you take all this into consideration and you have faith that the science is on the right track when it comes to phylogeny specifically, then belief in phylogeny, because that's what it is at this point, it's not proven, would mean you must reject the Bible. There are some people like Nathaniel Jeanson that claim that the mtDNA branches of the phylogenetic tree represent the 3 sons of Noah. This is untrue. He misrepresents the data by showing an unrooted phylogenetic tree, and evolutionary scientists have already rooted this tree to illustrate there aren't 3 branches representing 3 Noah's children. Population genetics has its place in showing the movements of our people, but phylogeny must be rejected as it relies heavily on the assumption of common ancestry, with no evidence to support this. Take, for instance, this paper. It clearly shows a split occurred between haplogroup E and haplogroup D. Haplogroup D can be found in Tibetan Chinese and the Ainu of Japan. We identify these nations biblically as the Moabites and the Ammonites, the children of Lot. When we read Genesis chapter 13 from verse 8, we see these two groups go their separate ways. And Abram said unto Lot, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right, or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes, and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separate themselves the one from the other. It's almost as if this academic paper shows this exact account of the separation of these groups that would have taken place nearly 4,000 years ago, not the tens of thousands that this paper implies due to molecular dating methods. With Abraham and Lot being close relatives, we cannot assume haplogroups are made up of pure ethnicities, as you would almost have to assume by accepting phylogeny into the study of population genetics. I find population genetics interesting, but we have to be careful to separate what can factually be proved from what is still theoretical, no matter how widespread that theoretical belief is. I think I've made my point without getting too in-depth about how we can use DNA to prove who we are. This will be my final video on the Tribe of Asher Origin series. With these 4 videos, you'll always be able to come back to them and ground yourself in the knowledge of who you are. After this, I advise understanding the law and applying it to your life. It was designed with you in mind. I still have to do Isaiah and Ezekiel's prophecy for the Northern Kingdom, which I'll do separately, but these 4 videos are a great introduction into understanding who you are and a reminder that God chose you to be one of His set apart. All praises to the Most High.